Now we turn attention to some matters that's got to do with, remember the question about the allocation of polling units? We're going to delve into it. Babajide Ogunsanwo joins us now. He's our data and information analyst. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
I remember it was huge last time out, 2015, but it came up again sometime this year, which INEC and several people have responded to, but you looked into it. Tell us about the figures.
I think the question for today is, do polling units influence the results of an election? And that's what we need to focus on. Well, that is the solution. Should we perhaps even first of all redefine the problem and look at if today's problems, polling units will solve? Because again, do we want a better country? Yes, we do. Do we want a more peaceful country? Yes, we do. Do we want good men and women in politics? Yes, we do. So that is the approach. And then we find out if, by achieving these three things, polling units will change it rather. But before then, Chamberlain, we need to even look at something much bigger, and that is the three wars we are facing today. We are facing a religious war, we are facing an ethnic war, and again, we are facing an amalgamation war, and they are all connected to polling units, and I'll explain that. I say we are facing a religious war because exactly 2 months ago, on the 27th of February, the U.S. included ISIS West Africa as part of its terrorist watch list. Now, this is quite significant to even how we vote. Because by including ISIS West Africa, they were just one step short of saying it is really ISIS Nigeria. And do we have facts to prove it? Yes, we do. Today, the population of West Africa is just 360 million. The phenomenal thing is more than half of the population of West Africa is in Nigeria. That is the fact.
More than half.
More than half of West Africa's population is in Nigeria. And so in reality, Nigeria is West Africa. And so when they say ISIS West Africa, in reality, what the U.S. is one step short of saying is ISIS Nigeria. That is the fact. And what does ISIS represent? They are not just a terror group. Their goal from when they were founded was to develop an Islamic caliphate. And again, when we look at where all of these fights are coming from, where are all these polling units? It's all coming from the north. And so when we say there are fights, we need to understand we are facing a religious war. I talked about an ethnic war. Pick up today's headlines. The kind of news you'll be reading, Fulanis, the thieves, the Idomas. But again, it all goes back to our fundamental history, the Nok culture. Right from the history, it is in the genes of this region. They've got what we call the INEC virus. The Fulanis also have it, whereby everyone wants to have the last say. And so when major tribes that are infested with this INEC virus are contesting for space, they're expanding, then we need to realize that it requires more than a political solution. That is the second one. The first is the religious war, which we now have facts that we're facing. The second is the ethnic war. Now the third is what people think about, which brings us to polling units. They call it a political war. I don't think we're facing a political war between the APC or PDP. The truth is we are facing an amalgamation war. What do I mean by an amalgamation war? Today we are two countries governed as one. We're actually not just one country, it's two countries governed by one as one. Do I have facts to prove it? Oh yes, I do. Let's look at the history of this system. Shagari, the first president, was from the north. Was it a coincidence that Alex Ekweme from Anambra was from the south? If you think it was just a mere coincidence, what happened when Abiola won the election? Where was his vice president from? From the north.
But they not voted for?
Oh yes, they did.
Did they emerge through valid processes?
Well, we need to ask ourselves, never in our history have we had a president and a vice from the same region. When Obasanjo came back in 1999, his vice from the north. Eventually, when Umaru Yar'Adua also came, his vice had to be from the south. When his vice became president, he had to choose a vice from the north. Today, we also have President Buhari from the north, his vice from the south. Chamberlain, here's what I mean. We've had 6 consecutive presidents and vice presidents, and they've always followed that pattern. North, south, like a clock, north, south. So we should ask ourselves, is this a mere coincidence? Or in reality, are we 2 countries that were just being governed as one?
But one can also look at it as played out federalism, true federalism.
As stipulated in our laws.
No, true federalism, quite correct. But again, is true federalism more superior than merit? Again, looking at the polling units as well, the distribution of the polling units, it also follows that same pattern, north-south. 119,000 polling units, but 2 zones hold approximately half of these polling units. That is the fact. The northwest and the southwest are the only 2 zones that have over 20,000 polling units. That is a statement of fact. INEC says between the northwest and the southwest, we have approximately 52,244 polling units. Now, today's challenge is, if these 2 zones hold approximately half of the polling units, it simply means half of the voting opportunities are within 2 zones. Again, statement of fact. So it is clearly quite easy to understand what will happen next year when 2 zones hold approximately half of the polling units. But even more interesting, let's look at what is going on in these 2 zones, Chamberlain. The northwest and the southwest. 12 out of 13 governors within these 2 zones are from the APC. Statement of fact. 32 out of 39 senators from these 2 zones are from the APC. Another statement of fact. 134 House of Representative members out of 164 members within these 2 zones are from the APC. And so when the APC controls 2 zones, when more than 80% of the senators are from one party, where more than 80% of the House of Representative members are from one party, where more than 90%, in actual fact, only one governor between the northwest and the southwest, Ekiti, is not from the ruling party, then a lot of people ask, what gives President Buhari the confidence to want to recontest? In 2 zones that hold approximately half of the polling units, the APC has a clear majority. So but here's what I mean. There are only 3 ways the APC wouldn't win. The first is if there's an implosion in the party. The second is if there's a mass defection in the party. And the third is if the opposition play the 402 principle. Now, what is the 402 principle? I'll probably share that in the days ahead.
Tell us about polling units and turnout for voter elections.
You know, the general myth is the more polling units, the more the voter turnout will be. But again, the last election's results doesn't clearly prove that. Again, we look at the South-South that had the highest voter turnout, over 59% average voter turnout in the South-South, even though they only had 15% of the polling units. Then you look at the Southwest that had over 20% of the polling units, had a lower turnout. And so you realize that voter turnout are higher in regions that have candidates. So the South had the highest voter turnout during the presidential election of 2015 because we then had President Goodluck Jonathan. And so there were interests. There was lots of interest from that region. The second region that had the highest voter turnout in 2015 was from the Northwest. They also had their candidate. It was then candidate Buhari. So in reality, what influences voter turnout isn't by INEC increasing the number of polling units. The reality is voter turnout automatically increases in regions where the citizens feel they've got a stake. But in the final analysis, the most important thing is that we've realized is the minority votes while the majority complain. So we need to ask ourselves, Chamberlain, what group do you belong to?
That's a fine place to anchor with a good question. And thank you for coming on this morning. Are you expecting an answer?
Forward to.
He
We'll
was
reveal that. We'll
involved.
reveal that. We'll reveal that. It's going to be
All right.
one of the most interesting elections in our history.
Well, yes, indeed. So you also have a role to play there with, you know what it is, the PVC. That's the show today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Ustav.
I'm Gimba Umar.
I'm Ajuri Ngalale. Have a great weekend, everybody.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this program are those of the maker and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and endorsement of Channels Television.